Hi, I'm Adam DeSanctis. Welcome to MBA Now. I'm here today with Robert Maddox of the law firm Bradley to discuss CFPB compliance management, specifically as it pertains to unfair or deceptive acts or practices, UDAAP for short. Robert, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
So let's talk compliance management systems. What are some of the components of one that institutions should include to meet regulatory expectations?
Well, the one thing about UDAAP is the best defense to UDAAP is going to be a strong offense in your compliance management system. You have the ability for your organization, for your mortgage company, to define UDAAP and then build your CMS around that. So there's some key components that we think about overall in building out a UDAAP system for CMS. So first off, board management and oversight, clear communication between leadership and compliance teams regarding UDAAP risk and responsibilities. Second would be your risk assessments. Regularly assess UDAAP risk across the products, services, marketing practices that you have. Third, policies and procedures, developing, implementing detailed UDAAP policies and procedures tailored to the institution's products and services. If you're a mortgage origination, you're going to look more at the marketing. If you're a mortgage servicer, you're going to look more at the client connection and interaction. Fourth, we talk about training, regular UDAAP training for all staff at all levels, from board of directors all the way down throughout your organization. Next, monitoring and testing is our fifth component that we would look at. Look at your business practices, look at the advertisements, look at your disclosures for potential UDAAP concerns, and then regularly update those as you move through. You can also look at the CFPB website for other enforcement matters that have come up that you can then track against. Our sixth component in CMS would be complaint management and implementing a system for tracking, addressing consumer complaints, understanding and analyzing them for potential UDAAP concerns. The one thing that we always say about UDAAP and consumer complaints, watch out for scope creep. A borrower may make a complaint to a regulator or to an agency, Better Business Bureau about a specific issue, but in viewing that complaint, it may come up to be a UDAAP issue. And then finally, look at corrective actions with regard to your UDAAP violations and where you utilize independent reviews to work through those. Again, for UDAAP, the best defense is a good offense in CMS.
Robert, those are incredible points there, and that's very useful information here for our viewers. As you know, the CFPB last year issued that policy statement on abusive acts and practices. What did that say, and what impact has it had on compliance programs?
Right, and it did. It came out in April of 2023. And the two things that it really focuses on is one, is there a material interference with the ability of the consumer to understand a term or condition of a product or a service? And then two, does it take unreasonable advantage of the consumer? So let's kind of break that down and give some examples. One, does it materially interfere? So think about this in disclosures. Is there an act or omission that either withholds or de-emphasizes, could be considered confusing? And thinking about that from an interference standpoint, what about buried disclosures? This is something that we often think about and hear about on the origination side. Is there fine print? Is there complex language? Is there industry jargon that we may use? Two other points. One is physical interference. Is there conduct that impedes the person's ability to see or hear or to understand a condition? And then finally, in our information age, we have digital interference. Is there an impediment or an obstacle that's put in place for the consumer to hear, see, or understand? It could be pop-ups. It could be drop-down boxes. It could be multiple click-throughs. So those are the things that are on the material interference. That second prong is taking advantage of. So let's kind of break that down the way that the CFPB does. If we take advantage, do they lack an understanding? Is there a gap in the consumer's understanding or knowledge which impedes their decision? For example, on the mortgage origination side, do they understand the costs in the origination process? One thing to be really clear about here, because when we think about UDAP, but especially in the abusive, we tend to think of, is it untruthful? Is it dishonest? They don't have to be untruthful or dishonest statements. They just have to create a gap in the consumer's knowledge. So going back through and thinking through your products and your disclosures that way. Our second prong would be an inability to protect themselves. Is there unequal bargaining power between the consumer and the mortgage company? One of the issues that they talk about all the time is that they can't switch providers, or they can't seek more favorable terms. Specifically here, the policy statement that the CFPB put out calls out credit reporting agencies, debt collectors, and third-party loan servicers because the consumer can't switch, so they can't protect themselves. Also, form contracts where it's a take it or leave it contract where the borrower can't negotiate has also been an area where the borrower has the inability to protect themselves. Finally, we've got reasonable reliance. And this is a question is, does the consumer rely on the mortgage company, whether originator, broker, servicer, third-party vendor, to make a decision for them? Does the business hold themselves out as acting on behalf of the consumer? Are they acting as an intermediary? Are they acting as a broker, say, in the origination process? In the alternative, on the servicing side, look at it from a call center perspective. Is the representative providing advice to the borrower, say a borrower in default or in loss mitigation? From that standpoint, does the borrower have a reasonable reliance that the call center agent is acting on their best interest? So those are kind of the broad views of what happens in the 2023 policy statement.
Yeah, I think that's a great breakdown of the policy statement. To sort of follow up on that, do you think it really changed what regulators will consider as abusive?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because specifically in the policy statement itself, it's not so much the standard, but it's why they created that standard. They specifically call out mortgage lenders and the secondary market as the reasons why they brought together this abusive policy statement. And even goes further to say that the CFPA, the Consumer Financial Protection Act of 2010, had it been in place in 2006 and 2007, that the CFPB would have likely avoided the crisis. So it is both mortgage focused and historically mortgage centric. So yes, it does change the way the regulators look at abusive inside of the context for mortgage companies.
Yeah, I think our members and many of us agree with that. Robert, this has been a great, fascinating conversation. Where should our viewers go for more information on this?
Well, I think the best place to go is the source of the truth. You can go to the CFPB's website, look specifically for the 2023 policy statement that outlines the things in much more detail than I did here today. You can also go to the CFPB website and look on enforcement actions and look for the term abusive act or abusive practice. And that will give you some enforcement actions so you can go into further detail as you look at CMS and as you look at your whether marketing practices or servicing practices.
Robert, I've enjoyed having you as a guest today. This is fascinating information. We hope to have you again on soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate you and the MBA for having me.